Hello and welcome to the Internet of Things Made Simple. I'm Larry Humor. This is episode number 18. Thanks for joining us. As always, shout out to our new listeners. Welcome aboard. Check out our webpage, theinternetofThingsMadeSimple.com, which has some phenomenal material on IoT. Of course, that's just me saying that. And as always, I kindly ask you subscribe to this podcast using your favorite podcast service. In our main segment, we're going to be covering how IoT and AI are changing all aspects of the food industry. This includes how it improves how food is grown, whether that's a vegetable, fruit, or livestock, how it's processed, how it's transported, and how we monitor it for potential recalls and for contamination. This goes well with our next episode, episode 19, where, among other topics, we'll be covering how IoT is changing how we buy food. This could include your trip to your local supermarket, when you go to a restaurant, and how it's enabling and changing how food is delivered, including those great services where you can get whatever food you want delivered to your house. Why weren't they available in college? You can't tell me McDonald's wouldn't have been great at 2 o'clock in the morning, but I digress. To get us started, though, we're going to look at a rather sad topic, the recent Boeing plane crash in Africa. If you're a listener to this show for a while, you might remember in our second mini episode way back in December, we asked if the use of IoT and automation is forcing us to reduce or lose our dogfighting skills. That's, of course, a reference to pilots and also from the movie Top Gun. In that episode, we covered the first plane crash involving the 737 MAX, which was the one on the Lion Air Airlines. In general, the concept of automation is benefiting our society greatly. It helps give doctors unique views and details, which we covered previously. It's definitely helping to reduce our greenhouse and carbon footprint. It's helping to make our cars safer, and it's making our workers more productive than ever before. I don't think, nor do I expect, that the move towards automation will slow down anytime soon. But as always, are we going to learn from this tragedy when it comes to other aspects of our life? Will we always require that a doctor, a nurse, or someone is present during a future automated surgery? And will that defeat some of the return on investment in doing so? Will we demand that a driver always has the ability to take back control of a self-driving car? And along those same lines, are we going to demand that people still take a driving test to be able to do so? As I've stated before, we need to judge automated solutions with similar standards to humans. However, we put safety standards in things all over the place to verify humans' work. Flight attendants double-check or cross-check, whatever it's called, doors to make sure they're closed. Multiple people initial or mark to ensure the right limb or body part is removed during surgery. And companies require multiple measurements and technologies when structures are built. I think we need to have these same standards put in for automated solutions to ensure we don't have any more similar tragedies. When we come back from the break, we're going to look at how IoT is changing all aspects of agriculture, right from seed to store. Back in a few seconds. And welcome back. For this part of the episode, we're going to cover off how IoT is changing a few key aspects of the food industry, including how food is being raised or grown, how food is being processed, and how it improves how food is transported and tracked throughout all those steps. As I mentioned, next week, there is a second part to this, highlighting how IoT is helping restaurants, grocery stores, and food delivery services be more productive. We're going to start off with how food is grown and raised, and that takes us to the farm. When one thinks of a farm, the idea does not always come to mind of technology. You rather think of open fields, barns, and, in my case, maybe the strong smell of poop everywhere. However, farms are very fertile grounds. Yeah, I get it. That's a bit cheesy. That's not what I meant, though, for IoT. And it starts with water or irrigation systems. Most farms are located nowhere near a major city, so they can't tap into an existing water source, which means they have to use groundwater, and that may mean limited water supplies, and that does give them a vested interest in reducing water usage. By using sensors to measure the current level of moisture, as well as the rainfall that might have fallen over the past little while, farmers are better able to reduce water usage. And they're even able to differentiate it by crop. So say crop A needs a certain amount of water and crop B needs a different amount. They can see what has fallen in both areas and adjust the irrigation systems on the fly, or even have it being done automatically using artificial intelligence. The other way they can optimize the use of water, as well as to get more production per acre, is to use something called RTK, which is another way of saying automated planting systems. I have to admit, the first time I saw an RTK solution, it kind of freaked me out a little bit because what you see is a planter driving down without a driver on it. But it uses a number of technologies. I'm not going to get too nerdy here, but it uses GPS combined with cellular communications and different positioning to allow the farmers to plant more evenly. And when I say that, you can virtually fire a laser down the lines that it planted. It's that accurate. That allows them to get much more plants done per acre, but it also allows them to use less water. The other thing it does is that because it's not relying on daylight like a farmer who was planting would, you can have the planting go well into the evening, and that can shorten the planting season. So just in case you have bad weather or whatever else. The next part is about inspection. And for me, inspecting my garden is kind of easy. It's about the size of a big pool table, and I can see it from my kitchen window. And I can see when the stupid deers and rabbits get in there. But if you have dozens or hundreds of acres, it's not quite that easy. And if you factor in that many crops might not have issues that are visible by looking at it straight on like a human would, you often need to look down at them to see what's going on. That involves a different technology, and a really cool one, I have to admit, because it uses drones. Drones are used to inspect the crops, first by the farmers, which kind of makes sense, but I also found it kind of cool that local authorities who are trying to catch if people are planting illegal crops are also using drones to fly overhead, because some smart farmers will put all the legal stuff on the outside, and then in the middle they put the really good stuff, and that's what they want to zoom in on. On to the next part. I know where I live in Calgary. The city is pretty big geographically. Like, we're not New York City population, but things are pretty spread out. So you can be pretty far away from somebody and still be in the city. Because of that, it's often difficult to use weather forecasts that are only from one location like the airport. Because I'm, 45-minute drive from there, but still in the city, my weather can be quite different than the airport. The same holds true for farmers, because some of these farms are huge, especially some of the larger farms owned by big companies. You're going to have different weather even on the same farm. And that's when a lot of them are starting to use weather stations. What they really are is a bunch of sensors that bring information in, and then there's some intelligence to say what's been going on in terms of rainfall, but what might also be coming. So it'll better predict a potential disaster or even some kind of a major rainfall. Maybe they want to cover something. That's something that's becoming quite popular now. If I ask you to think of landmarks or things that represent a farm, there could be a lot of things, but for many people, depending on where you are, it could be a grain silo. Because as you're driving across the prairies, especially in the US and Canada, you're going to see a lot of those. It's not exactly a high-tech idea. It's storing grain. But surprisingly, they're becoming very advanced. They've been using cellular IoT solutions for a long time, and that's kind of for two reasons. These aren't generally in the middle of the city. They're often in the middle of nowhere, so a landline just wasn't practical for the most part. But the other part, equally important, is the value of the grain inside is enough that you're going to want to keep an eye on it. The first way they've been using IoT for grain silos is to track the condition of the grain itself. They're looking at a few things. One is the conditions inside, temperature, humidity, things like that. But they're also using vibration and level sensors to detect a possible theft and even to detect an earthquake or any kind of natural disaster. The other kind of usage kind of surprised me a bit. See, I'm not an expert on grain. I'd never realized how many variations there were of grain until I had the pleasure of sitting next to a grain farmer one time on a plane. You know what? I think I can now teach grain at a PhD level. I'm not kidding, but I digress. He was actually a really nice guy. One of the main issues with mixing grain together is that it can dramatically reduce the value of each, the contamination, I guess they call it. To avoid this, companies are using barcode-based work orders. So you can visualize the person dropping off will scan the barcode on their work order, and that will automatically trigger that I should open up silo number 4, and that's the only silo that opens. And this prevents any kind of cross-contamination. On the other side of farming, aside from crops, you have the raising of animals. IoT solutions are used during all aspects of their lives. First, different solutions, and I have no idea how, by the way, in this, and I have no interest in learning how, just in case you were wondering. Different solutions are used to determine the proper time to inseminate a cow. So I'm just going to move on to the next point and not belabor that one if you don't mind. The next part about animals is that depending on the size of the farm, it can be difficult to locate them, especially if they're grass-fed animals. They can go a fair distance away. The tracking is often done using a local area solution, like some kind of a radio or RFID-like solution. But I suspect with the lower cost of NB-IoT and CAD-M, along with technologies like Sigfox and LoRa, I think it's going to change that you're not going to have a local area solution. I think it's going to be a wide area one. And that allows them to track in case the cow or horse or whatever it might be might have gotten out and it's gone pretty far away. It's important to know where they are, but it's equally important to know how they're doing. There are many biometric solutions, so yes, there are Fitbit-like solutions for livestock that help keep track of their well-being, and that's everything from the traditional temperature and the amount of movement they get, but some of them even delve into their mental status. I'm, again, not quite sure how it works, but apparently if an animal is having some kind of distress, they might not eat as much, or they could have different issues, and considering how valuable some of these animals might be, you can see how that's kind of important. Finally, there is milking, and I do have to wonder, what exactly was the first person who discovered that you could drink milk from a cow doing? Like, I get it, being alone in a big space can lead to some boredom, but how bored do you have to get that curious? Anyways, automated milking solutions help to not only maximize the amount of milk that is gathered, but they can apparently determine which cows are in the most likely mood to be milked. Again, very similar to the part about insemination. I was definitely not curious enough to find out how they determine this, so if you're interested, knock yourself out. Once the crop or the animal is fully grown, it's now time for processing. Most processing today is done at large facilities, and that's where we're going to start. Like any other factory, most of these facilities have very large pieces of machinery that are quite vital to their operation. IoT excels at keeping track of some of the key variables about these machines. Things like its current operating temperature, to know if it's operating too high or too low, its hours of operation, which could help keep maintenance schedules online, and if power usage has gone up. In case you're wondering, why is it important to note if power usage has gone up? That's mainly because if the power draw is too big or too high for a particular piece of machinery, it could very well indicate a potential failure, and that will help you maintain these things in better order. In order to ensure that their end product meets the standards that their customers are expecting, many food processors will try to ensure that all the input ingredients meet their desired standards. They do this in a couple ways. The first one is by using RFID tags that contain all the vital information about the input product. We will cover this more in the section on how IoT is tracking food end-to-end. Many of them are also using different video surveillance systems, combined with AI software to scan for things like unwanted bruises on pieces of fruit or vegetables. It can measure the size of a fruit to know if it was picked too early or too late, and it can even look for a sign of unwanted bacteria or insects on these items. Along the same lines, sensors are used in different parts of the process to ensure there is not an excessive amount of dirt, bacteria, or any other unwanted item that might cause issues with the finished product. Once everything is done and processed, the final product often needs to be stored at the facility before being sent out. Smart fridges allow for multiple different products to be stored easily, and they can even change their temperature and humidity levels by scanning the barcode when the product is put inside. Finally, one of the easiest ways to reduce the level of greenhouse gases, and we're going to cover a few other ways in the next section, is to grow your own vegetables. Next week, we're going to talk about how IoT is helping many restaurant owners do just that, but they're doing it for a different purpose. They're doing it because they're absolutely obsessed with quality and freshness, and this is the best way to get the freshest produce and herbs for their masterpiece. Growing your own can be difficult depending on where you live. Now, I'm a bit of a health nut, as I've spoken about before. I try to drink a smoothie each day, and I love putting in strawberries and raspberries and other fresh fruit. Living where I live in Alberta, not that far away is the Okanagan Valley, which has some wonderful fruit grown, maybe 5-6 hour drive away. Unfortunately, for big chunks of the year, even that area gets too cold for these kind of fruits to be done. So the fruit that we eat often makes its way from California or even Mexico. New IoT solutions are helping northern climates grow items that were normally never possible. So maybe avocados will start coming from Canada one of these days. This same technology is also used to enhance the growing of another crop, that being marijuana. Now, to be honest, where I live, it's legal, and many growers are using IoT solutions to help enhance their yields. And that ranges from optimizing the LED lighting systems to the different water levels and even achieving the perfect temperature. Now, if marijuana is not legal where you are, just disregard that section, I guess. So your crop has grown, or you've raised your animal, and it has undergone any processing that it has to undergo. It is now time to get your products to where your customers are. Depending on the item that you are shipping, there may be different variables that have to be maintained to ensure it arrives in its optimal condition. Like no one wants melted ice cream, so ice cream needs to remain frozen, fruit wants to have a certain temperature and humidity, and so on. Before, it was really anyone's guess if those conditions were met during travel and if they remained optimal at all times. Now many solutions allow for the monitoring of different variables, and this ensures there is a reduced chance of contamination or spoilage during transport. In addition to watching the conditions, food customers are now demanding an extra set of eyes. They're using spy fruit. Okay, so it's not James Bond level cool. It's just a sensing device that kind of looks like a piece of fruit, but its job is to monitor for conditions that may lead to a faster level of things going bad or contamination. These sensors usually look just like a piece of fruit, and they're often used or demanded by large grocery stores. Another way to ensure that food does not spoil or become contaminated is to ensure it does not get lost. This can happen in two ways. First, we all get lost. Even those dudes that refuse to use a map or GPS, even they truly do get lost. GPS solutions allow us to know where the trucks are going and to ensure they arrive on time. The other part about being lost is at the skid level. If you've ever seen the size of these warehouses, they're incredible. They're so huge. Now, food gets lost in my kitchen and goes away and never gets found until it's spoiled. Imagine a warehouse for Walmart. RFID tags are often used on board skids to ensure that when they're offloaded, they're put where they're supposed to be and they're kept track of inside the warehouse. Finally, RFID tags are also great for providing information. I've mentioned RFID tags a couple times, but just in case you don't know what I'm talking about, think of it as a barcode on steroids. It contains more information, and this could include things like the origin, so even down to the farm level, the time or day that something was picked. You kind of get the understanding here. Whatever information has to be on there could be on there. This allows food retailers to better watch their inventory and to reduce the price of items that might become spoiled before they become spoiled because they'll know more about it. As I mentioned, in next week's episode, we're going to talk a little bit more about this. And in that episode, we're going to talk more about how IoT is helping the area of food service. Among the topics we're going to cover are how IoT is enabling the smart kitchen at restaurants, how IoT is resulting in less food waste and lower overall operation costs, how automation is changing the area of food service, and how IoT is helping restaurants improve all aspects of the eating experience, including things like what music is played, and I'll leave that as a bit of a hint, and how it's improving the home delivery services. When we come back from a short break, we're going to look at how office technology from the era of Mad Men is actually making a big comeback and even growing in popularity. Back in a few seconds. And welcome back. As I mentioned in my book, I do love and loved Mad Men. Yeah, I get it. It was not exactly the best time for many different people out there. Like, I'm not sure how much more sexist or discriminatory they could have been, and I'm really not sure the level of drinking at the office could even be tolerated nowadays. But you have to remember, it looks back upon a time and a place where creativity was starting to emerge, so that's more where I was fascinated by Mad Men. One technology, although it was invented before the time of Mad Men, but became more commonplace in that era, was the fax machine. Once left for dead, it appears that fax machines are making a strong comeback, or in many areas of the world, never went away. In certain countries, namely Japan and Germany, and in many sectors all around the world, millions of faxes are still sent on a daily basis. In fact, a recent survey said that up to 90% of all professionals have sent a fax in the last 90 days. I guess I'm among the 10% who has not. Now, not all faxes are set up the same way they used to be. The definition of what a fax is has grown a little bit. Many are now scanned in the same way, but are sent to cloud-based services, which in essence treats them like an image or a PDF file. Some of these fax machines now are even IP-based, which eliminates the need to look around for a POTS line or even to keep on paying for one if you don't need one anymore. Why hasn't faxing died off? I kind of wonder that, so I did a bit more research. The main reason is security, or at least the perception of security. Many industries, especially government and medical, do not consider email to be as secure, and so they will not allow for many key records to be transmitted that way. In fact, in general, it's been less than 10 years that electronic signatures have been accepted for many high-end drug prescriptions, like the Schedule II ones in the US. As I mentioned in the podcast on smart medicine, one of the issues that we have today, and we're definitely going to have moving forward as we go further into digital medicine, is interoperability between systems. Faxing something over ensures that the right file format is used each time, which kind of makes sense. You can just print it off and stuff it into the file. Finally, for many people, there's a if it ain't broken, don't fix it mentality. For all of its issues and slow and all the different times we've had fun using fax machines, it's a very proven technology, and it also gives a unique backup in the event of an internet failure or an attack of some kind that happens to take down part of the internet. So what will stop people from using faxing if they're very much into it? It's probably mostly perception. I think there has to be a much stronger sense of security for key records in technologies like email and scanning before this happens. However, as I pointed out in one of our first preview podcasts about elections, I'm not quite sure we've gotten to the point of preventing all online attacks to go away from paper ballots, and that might be the same for many key documents, so expect the fax machine to keep on living. Thanks again for listening. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. As always, I want to hear your feedback, good, bad, and even ugly. We do have a Facebook page, The Internet of Things Made Simple, go figure. Drop me a note through there. It also has some links to some other podcasts, to some blogs, and even to some ebooks, so check it out. If we're connected on LinkedIn, that could be a good place to start. Drop me a message that way. And if we're connected personally, drop me an email or a text. Thanks again. Talk soon. I'm Larry Bohumor.